A Mustang gallops freely under the open sky, unaware of the man who once raised it with love and care. 20 years have passed, and their bond seemed lost to time. But when fate brings them back together, something extraordinary happens. A recognition, so instant it will leave you speechless. This story will touch your soul and remind you of the unbreakable power of love and memory. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe, like this video, and turn on notifications to discover more heartwarming stories like this one. Jacob Alden squinted into the horizon, the rolling plains of Montana stretching endlessly before him. The air was crisp, filled with the scent of dry grass and wild sage. As he stepped onto the unfamiliar ranch, it had been years, decades, really, since he had last walked on land like this. After selling his family ranch years ago due to financial strain, Jacob had been forced to abandon not only the land he loved, but also the horses he had spent his life raising. One horse, in particular, had haunted his memory, a spirited chestnut Mustang named Ash. Ash had been more than just a horse to Jacob. He had been a partner, a symbol of the freedom and fire that Jacob had always admired. The day Ash was sold at auction was a day Jacob had vowed to forget, but never could. Now, 20 years later, Jacob was here on this ranch at the invitation of an old friend. Mike, a fellow rancher, had called him with an offer to tour the property and discuss a potential project involving wild Mustang rehabilitation. Jacob had hesitated, unsure if he was ready to face the reminders of a life he had lost. But something had drawn him here, a pull he couldn't quite explain. As he walked toward the corral, Jacob noticed a group of horses grazing near the fence line. His boots crunched against the dry dirt, the sound grounding him in the present. The horses were a mix of colors, bay, black, and gray, but one, in particular, caught his eye. A chestnut Mustang stood slightly apart from the others, its mane tousled by the wind. Jacob froze mid-step. Something about the way the horse moved, the way it carried itself, felt familiar. His heart quickened, the years melting away as a flood of memories surged forward. Could it be? Jacob's trance was broken by Mike's voice. The older man waved from the barn, a broad grin on his face. Jacob shook himself, forcing a smile as he approached. "Good to see you, Mike," he said, clasping his friend's hand. "You too, it's been a long time," Mike said. He gestured toward the horses. "Got some beauties out there." Jacob hesitated, glancing back at the chestnut Mustang. "Yeah," he said softly. "One of them reminds me of someone I used to know." Mike chuckled. "They have a way of doing that. Come on, let me show you round." As they toured the ranch, Jacob couldn't shake the feeling that the chestnut Mustang was watching him. Every so often, he'd catch a glimpse of the horse standing still, its dark eyes fixed on him. There was an intensity in its gaze, a recognition that sent shivers down Jacob's spine. "Hey, Mike," Jacob said as they walked past the corral. "What's the story with that chestnut out there?" Mike scratched his head. "That one came to us about a year ago. Picked him up at an auction. Wild as they come. It took us months just to get a halter on him." Jacob's breath caught. "Auction," he echoed, his mind racing. "Yeah," Mike said, nodding. "Why, you think you've seen him before?" Jacob didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned back to the horse, his heart pounding. "It couldn't be," he whispered to himself, unable to resist. Jacob walked toward the corral, the chestnut Mustang lifting its head, its ears pricking forward. Jacob stopped a few feet from the fence, his hands gripping the wooden rail. "Hey there, boy," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The Mustang stepped closer, its movements slow and deliberate. Jacob's chest tightened as the horse came to a stop just a few feet away. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other. Then, as if breaking some invisible barrier, the Mustang stretched its neck forward, its nostrils flaring as it sniffed the air around Jacob. Jacob's voice trembled. "Ash." The Mustang's ears flicked at the sound of the name. It stepped closer, its dark eyes locking onto Jacob's. The recognition was instant, undeniable. Jacob felt tears prick the corners of his eyes as the horse pressed its muzzle against his outstretched hand. "Oh, Ash," Jacob whispered, his voice breaking. "It's you." Jacob's hand trembled as he stroked the Mustang's muzzle, the warmth of the horse's breath grounding him in the moment. "Ash." The fiery chestnut Mustang he had raised from a foal stood before him after 20 long years. The odds of this reunion felt impossible, yet the connection between them was undeniable. Mike, watching from a distance, approached cautiously. "Jacob, are you all right?" he asked, his voice laced with curiosity. Jacob didn't look away from Ash, his voice low and filled with awe. "This is Ash, my Ash. I raised him and sold him when I lost the ranch." Mike's brow furrowed in disbelief. "You're telling me this horse is the same one you had decades ago?" Jacob nodded, his fingers brushing against the soft fur of Ash's neck. "I'd recognize him anywhere. That blaze on his forehead, the way he carries himself fits him." Mike crossed his arms, his skepticism softening as he watched the interaction. Ash, typically wary of strangers, stood calm and still, as though he, too, remembered Jacob well. "I'll be damned," Mike muttered. "I've never seen him act like this with anyone." Jacob couldn't pull himself away. Memories flooded back, training Ash as a colt, the long rides across open fields, and the bond they had shared, a bond that had made them inseparable. He remembered the auction, the gut-wrenching moment when he had to let Ash go. The guilt of that day had followed him like a shadow ever since. "Mike," Jacob said, his voice steady but firm, "I need to spend some time with him." Mike nodded. "Take all the time you need. I'll be in the barn if you need me." As Mike walked away, Jacob stepped closer to Ash, unhooking the latch on the corral gate. The Mustang didn't flinch, his dark eyes following Jacob's every move. "You've grown into a fine horse," Jacob said softly, his voice filled with emotion. "I never stopped thinking about you, boy." Ash nickered softly, his ears flicking back and forth as though listening. Jacob chuckled, wiping a tear from his cheek. "Still the same Ash I knew, always listening, always understanding." Jacob spent the rest of the afternoon with Ash, leading him out to the pasture and walking alongside him as he grazed. The Mustang's movements were fluid and confident, but Jacob noticed subtle signs of wear, the faint scars on his legs, and the slight stiffness in his gait. "What have you been through?" Jacob murmured, his heart aching for the years they had been apart. Ash lifted his head, his ears swiveling toward Jacob's voice. There was an intelligence in his gaze, a depth that spoke volumes without words. Jacob felt a surge of determination. Whatever hardships Ash had endured, he was here now, and Jacob wouldn't let him go again. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the plains in hues of orange and pink, Mike returned to the corral. "You look like you've picked up right where you left off," he said, leaning against the fence. Jacob nodded, his hand resting on Ash's neck. "It's like no time has passed at all. But I can't help wondering, what's his story? How did he end up here?" Mike rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "When we got him at the auction, he was in rough shape, malnourished, skittish, and didn't trust anyone. It took us months to get close enough to handle him properly." Jacob's jaw tightened. The thought of Ash suffering, of being mistreated, igniting a spark of anger in his chest. "Who sold him?" Mike shrugged. "Hard to say. The auction didn't have much information, just that he came from a ranch going there." Jacob's fists clenched at the thought. He had always hoped that whoever bought Ash would give him a good life. To think that his beloved horse had been neglected and passed around was almost too much to bear. But as Jacob looked at Ash, standing strong against the backdrop of the setting sun, he felt a sense of resolve. "It doesn't matter where he's been," he said quietly. "What matters is that he's here now, and I'm not letting him go again." Mike smiled, clapping Jacob on the shoulder. "Looks like fate had a hand in this one. You two were meant to find each other again." Jacob nodded, his eyes never leaving Ash. "Yeah," he said, his voice filled with conviction. "We were." As the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, Jacob found himself back at the corral. The crisp morning air carried the faint scent of dew and wildflowers, but his focus was entirely on Ash. The Mustang stood by the fence, his chestnut coat glowing in the soft sunlight, his dark eyes tracking Jacob's every move. Jacob leaned against the fence, a steaming cup of coffee warming his hands. "Morning, Ash," he said softly. The horse nickered in response, his ears flicking forward. The bond they had shared years ago was still there, but Jacob knew that 20 years apart couldn't simply be erased. He needed to rebuild that trust. 2 Show Ash that he was still the same person who had once cared for him like family. Later that morning, Mike found Jacob brushing Ash's coat in the paddock. The Mustang stood still. His muscles relaxed under Jacob's steady hands. "You've got a way with him," Mike said, leaning against the gate. Jacob smiled, his movements deliberate and gentle. "It's like he remembers everything, the truss, the routine, it's all still there." Mike nodded. "That's rare, you know. Horses usually take time to warm up, even to familiar faces. Booth's different. Jacob chuckled. He always was, determined to reconnect with Ash fully. Jacob decided to take him out for a short walk around the ranch. He fastened a halter and lead rope, speaking to the Mustang in low, soothing tones. "Let's see what you've got, old friend." Ash followed Jacob willingly, his steps confident but cautious. The ranch stretched out before them, its wide-open fields dotted with wildflowers and swaying grasses. Jacob marveled at how easily Ash fell into step beside him, as though no time had passed at all. "You haven't lost your stride," Jacob said, glancing at the horse. "Still the same strong, stubborn Ash I remember." The Mustang tossed his head, snorting as if to agree. As they walked, Jacob's thoughts drifted to the past. He remembered the first time he saw Ash, a gangly colt with a fiery spirit and an untamed energy that had challenged even the most experienced trainers. Jacob had spent countless hours working with him, building a partnership that went beyond commands and training. Ash had become more than just a horse. He had become a friend, a confidant, and a symbol of everything Jacob loved about ranch life. The loss of the ranch had been devastating, but losing Ash had broken something deep inside him. Now, with the Mustang by his side once more, Jacob felt a sense of wholeness he hadn't known in years. By the time they returned to the paddock, Ash seemed more at ease. His body language relaxed and his movements fluid. Jacob removed the halter and let the Mustang roam freely. "You've still got it, boy," he said. Leaning against the fence, Mike joined him, handing him a cold bottle of water. "Are you planning on sticking around a while?" Jacob took a sip, nodding. "I think I have to. I can't walk away from him again." Mike smiled. "I figured you'd say that. There's a cabin out back. It's not much, but it's yours if you want it." Jacob turned to his friend, gratitude shining in his eyes. "Thanks, Mike. That means a lot." That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Jacob sat outside the small cabin, watching Ash. The days passed in a steady rhythm on Mike's ranch, and Jacob found himself settling into a routine with Ash. Each morning, he would head to the paddock with a bucket of fresh feed and spend hours brushing the Mustang's coat, talking to him as though no time had passed. Ash had begun to thrive under Jacob's care, his chestnut coat gleaming and his muscles regaining their former strength. But Jacob knew there was one thing they hadn't yet done, something that had once defined their bond. It was time to see if Ash would allow him to ride again. The morning was crisp and clear, the sun just beginning to rise over the horizon. Jacob approached the paddock, carrying a saddle and bridle. Ash stood grazing near the fence, his ears twitching as Jacob approached. The sight of the equipment made the Mustang lift his head, his nostrils flaring slightly. Jacob chuckled softly. "You remember this, don't you?" he said, setting the saddle down on the fence. "I promise we'll take it slow." He spent the next hour grooming Ash, speaking to him in calm, reassuring tones. "We've done this before, buddy," Jacob said, running a brush along Ash's back. "And if you're not ready, that's okay. We'll go at your pace." When the time came to place the saddle on Ash's back, Jacob moved deliberately, giving the Mustang time to adjust. Ash shifted slightly, but didn't pull away, his trust in Jacob evident in the way he stood still. "That's my boy," Jacob murmured, securing the saddle, "just like old times." Mike watched from a distance, leaning against the barn door with a coffee cup in hand. "You think he'll let you ride?" he called out. Jacob glanced over his shoulder, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Only one way to find out. He gently led Ash to the center of the paddock, speaking softly as he adjusted the bridle. The Mustang followed willingly, his movements fluid and confident. Jacob's heart swelled with pride. Taking a deep breath, Jacob placed one foot in the stirrup and swung himself into the saddle. Ash shifted his weight, but didn't resist. Jacob sat still for a moment, letting the Mustang adjust to the familiar weight on his back. "You've still got it," Jacob said softly, patting Ash's neck. With a gentle nudge, Jacob urged Ash forward. The Mustang responded immediately, his gait smooth and steady as they moved around the paddock. Jacob couldn't help but smile. After 20 years, it felt as though no time had passed. As they picked up speed, memories flooded back. The long rides, across open fields, the quiet moments they had shared under the stars, and the bond that had made them inseparable. Mike watched in amazement as Jacob and Ash moved together, their connection as strong as ever. "You'd think they've been doing this every day for years," he muttered to himself. After a while, Jacob brought Ash to a stop and dismounted, his boots crunching against the dirt. He removed the saddle and bridle, letting the Mustang roam freely in the paddock. "You've still got the spirit," Jacob said, leaning against the fence. Ash trotted to the far side of the paddock before turning to face Jacob, his dark eyes locking onto him. Mike walked over, shaking his head in disbelief. "I've seen a lot of horsemen in my time, but what you've got with that horse, it's something else." Jacob smiled, his gaze never leaving Ash. He always has been. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Jacob sat outside the small cabin, a feeling of peace settling over him. He had spent years wondering if he would ever see Ash again, and now not only had they reunited, but they had picked up right where they left off. Their bond had stood the test of time, and Jacob knew that no matter what came next, they would face it together. The following weeks brought a renewed sense of purpose to Jacob's life. Every morning, he would rise early to tend to Ash, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. The Mustang had regained his strength and spirit, moving with the grace and confidence that Jacob remembered from years ago. But Jacob knew that Ash's transformation wasn't complete. There was one more step they needed to take, a true test of trust that would push them both beyond their comfort zones, riding together beyond the ranch's confines into the open plains, where Ash had once run wild. On a clear, crisp morning, Jacob prepared for their journey. He packed a small saddlebag with water, snacks, and a first aid kit. "Today's the day, Ash," he said, securing the saddle on the Mustang's back. Ash nickered softly, his ears flicking toward Jacob's voice. Mike appeared by the paddock gate, holding a thermos of coffee. "Are you sure about this?" he asked, his brow furrowed with concern. Jacob nodded, his hand resting on Ash's neck. "It's time. We need this, both of us." Mike sighed, handing Jacob the thermos. "Well, good luck. You two are a hell of a team. Just be careful out there." As they set off, the ranch quickly disappeared behind them, replaced by rolling hills and endless stretches of grassland. Jacob allowed Ash to set the pace, his movement smooth and deliberate. The Mustang seemed to relish the freedom, his ears perked and his gait steady. Jacob felt a surge of pride as he watched Ash navigate the terrain with ease. "This is where you belong," he said softly, his voice carried by the wind. "Out here where you can be free." They rode for hours, the rhythm of Ash's hooves blending with the sounds of the plains. Jacob felt a deep sense of peace, as though the years of separation had finally been erased. As the sun reached its zenith, Jacob guided Ash to a small stream, shaded by a cluster of trees. He dismounted, letting the Mustang drink and graze while he rested against a fallen log. The gentle breeze carried the scent of wildflowers, and for a moment, Jacob closed his eyes, savoring the tranquility. But the peace was short-lived. A distant rumble caught his attention, growing louder with each passing second. Jacob's eyes snapped open, and he turned toward the horizon. A herd of wild Mustangs was galloping toward them, their movements graceful and powerful. Ash lifted his head, his ears pricking forward. Jacob's heart clenched as he watched the Mustang take a step toward the herd, the longing in Ash's eyes unmistakable, a pull toward the freedom he had once known. Jacob stood, his chest tightening. He knew this moment might come and had prepared himself for it. But the following days brought a sense of calm to Jacob's life that he hadn't felt in years. Each moment with Ash seemed to reaffirm the bond they had rebuilt, a connection that felt stronger than ever. The Mustang followed Jacob around the ranch, his dark eyes filled with trust and curiosity. To Jacob, it was as though Ash had never left his side. One crisp morning, Jacob decided it was time to introduce Ash to more of the ranch. Though Mike's property was vast, Ash hadn't yet explored all of it. Jacob led the Mustang to an open pasture that stretched for miles, bordered by a quiet creek and shaded by clusters of cottonwoods. "This," Jacob said, gesturing to the expanse, "is where we're going to build something new, a place where you can run free, just like the old days." Ash nickered softly, his ears flicking forward. Jacob smiled, patting the Mustang's neck. "Let's see what you've got, boy." He released the lead rope, stepping back to give Ash room to move. For a moment, the Mustang hesitated, his nostrils flaring as he took in his surroundings. Then, with a powerful kick of his legs, Ash took off, his chestnut coat gleaming in the sunlight. Jacob watched in awe as Ash galloped across the field, his strides long and fluid. The Mustang's mane and tail flowed like ribbons in the wind, a breathtaking display of freedom and power. It was a sight Jacob had missed for so many years, a reminder of why he had fallen in love with the ranching life in the first place. "He's something else," Mike said, walking up beside Jacob. Jacob nodded, his voice filled with pride. "He always has been." As Ash slowed to a trot and returned to Jacob's side, a thought struck him. "Mike," he said, turning to his friend, "what if we made this place a sanctuary, a haven for other horses like Ash? Wild, wanted, or forgotten?" Mike raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "You mean something like a Mustang rescue?" "Exactly," Jacob said, his excitement building. "There are so many out there who need a second chance. We have the space and the resources, and Ash could be the one to show them the way." Mike scratched his chin thoughtfully. "It's not a bad idea. Could be a lot of work, but if anyone can do it, it's you." The idea took root quickly. Over the next few weeks, Jacob and Mike began laying the groundwork for the sanctuary. They built additional paddocks, repaired old fencing, and reached out to local organizations to learn more about Mustang rescues. Ash became the heart of the project, his story inspiring everyone who heard it. People from neighboring towns began visiting the ranch, bringing supplies and offering to help. Jacob was overwhelmed by the outpouring of support, but nothing compared to the joy he felt watching Ash thrive in his new role. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Jacob sat on the porch of his cabin, gazing out at the pasture where Ash grazed peacefully. The Mustang lifted his head, his dark eyes meeting Jacob's from across the field. "You've come a long way, boy," Jacob said softly. "And so have I," Ash nickered in response, his ears flicking forward as if he understood. Jacob smiled, a sense of contentment washing over him. The sanctuary officially opened a few months later, its first residents arriving from various rescues and auctions. Jacob watched as Ash greeted the newcomers, his presence calming and reassuring. It was as though the Mustang knew his role, stepping into it with the same grace and strength he had always shown. As Jacob leaned against the fence, watching the horses roam, Mike joined him. "You've built something incredible here," he said. Jacob nodded, his gaze fixed on Ash. "I didn't do it alone. He showed me the way." That night, as Jacob sat by the fire, he reflected on the journey that had brought him here, from the pain of losing Ash to the joy of finding him again. Every moment had led to this, a life filled with purpose, surrounded by the animals he loved. Ash had not only given Jacob a second chance at happiness, but had also inspired him to create a legacy that would endure for generations. Months turned into years, and the sanctuary thrived beyond Jacob's wildest dreams. The ranch became a haven for horses in need, a place where they could heal, grow, and rediscover their spirit. Word spread far and wide, drawing visitors who wanted to witness the incredible transformation of these animals. At the heart of it all was Ash. The chestnut Mustang had become a symbol of resilience and hope, his presence bringing comfort to every horse that arrived. Jacob often marveled at how Ash seemed to instinctively guide the newcomers, showing them that they were safe and cared for. One crisp autumn morning, Jacob stood by the paddock, watching as Ash led a small group of horses to the creek. The sunlight danced across the water, and Jacob felt a deep sense of peace. "He's your legacy," Mike said, walking up beside him. Jacob nodded, his voice steady. "And so is this place. It's not just about the horses, it's about the people they Touch Ash reminded me of that. As Ash lifted his head, his gaze met Jacob's from across the field. At that moment, Jacob knew they had come full circle. The bond they had shared was now the foundation of something far greater, a legacy of second chances and unbreakable connections. Ash's story reminds us that love and trust can overcome even the longest separations. If this story touched your heart, help us spread the message of hope and second chances. Subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it with someone who loves inspiring tales of connection and resilience. Together, we can honor the spirit of animals like Ash and create a world where every life gets the second chance it deserves.